I'm very excited to kick off our final panel session of this workshop, and one I'm quite looking forward to getting into. So we just talked about some of the physical modernization efforts that need to be done to the grid. Grid security also plays a big role in facilitating transmission. So today, our panelists will talk about some of the implications for grid security. I will turn it over to our panelists for introductions, and then we can get into some of the discussion. We'll start with Chris.
Hi, thanks. My name is Chris Ott. I'm the Director of Security for Critical Infrastructure for Power Engineers, member of WSP. My career spans back to the late 90s when I joined the United States Marine Corps, and I was a power generation distribution expert for the first half of that portion of my career, and the latter half we focused after the war started to kick off, changed our direction and started doing a little bit of war planning. So my job then became to figure out how to destroy utilities, which was actually a really fun job. I got out and got my engineering degree, spent the next 7 years designing, helping with plans, processes, procedures, and technology for critical infrastructure. And then the next 10 years I spent in corporate security for a fairly sizable utility in the Pacific Northwest. And now I'm with Power Engineers. So that's my background.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service in the Marine Corps, even though it was to blow up utilities. So, and my name is Duane Highley. I serve as CEO for Tri-State Generation and Transmission Association. If Bill Ritter was still in the room, he'd say Tri-State's a very poorly areas. What I heard you say once, and I've adopted it as mine, is Tri-State is a very poorly named cooperative because we serve in 4 states. So it's our 40-member utilities that buy from us are in Nebraska, Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico. All of it public power, either public power districts or cooperatives. If you look at the footprint of Tri-State's members, we serve the wholesale energy and transmit it to them, and then they sell it retail in their local communities. Again, nonprofit member-owned cooperatives or public power districts, all of them. About 200,000 square miles of service territory. So it's bigger than the state of California. It's probably the largest utility you've never heard of. And the reason for that is it's only about 1.5 million people that are served because it's some of the most rugged and remote areas of the American West. So we get the privilege to serve some of these beautiful, beautiful areas that are really hard to get to. And so I'm proud to be with you this morning. I also serve as co-chair of the Electric Subsector Coordinating Council. And probably the reason why I'm on this panel is to talk about grid security. The Electric Subsector Coordinating Council is the principal liaison between the federal government and electric utilities. I'll say more about that when I come to my remarks.
All right, good morning. I'm Nate Gleason. I'm the program leader for cyber and critical infrastructure at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. So we are a Department of Energy national laboratory. Program that I lead actually serves across a number of different federal departments. So we support Department of Energy, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense, and the intelligence community. And focus a lot on the issues of critical infrastructure. And when we talk about critical infrastructure, number one among the infrastructure sectors is always energy. So a big, strong focus on energy sector. 2 big things that we work to support United States government in, both focused around this concept of gray zone threats. So that is the sub-kinetic conflict that we've been in with Russia and China for many, many years now. We focus on the concept of infrastructure deterrence. The idea is that adversaries can hold our critical energy infrastructure at risk in order to prevent the United States from executing certain functions or compel it to do certain things. And this idea of energy dominance, the idea that we can use energy to achieve our national security goals. So our program is focused on creating technologies, deploying systems, running operations that enhance and further U.S. goals in both those 2 areas.
Great. Well, I think as we've heard over the past couple of days, the themes of collaboration and partnership are really central to a lot of these efforts with transmission. So I'd like to turn it over to Duane to talk a little bit about some of the efforts going on with the Electricity Subsector Coordinating Council, what that looks like, what that engagement's been like, and yeah, what can you tell us there?
Okay, so thank you for that. So if you think back to 9/11, following 9/11, the federal government said we need to have a better way of getting information and sharing it with industry and government, detecting threats, preparing for threats, and responding to threats in a coordinated fashion. And hence they set up a bunch of coordinating councils on 16 different critical security areas. So areas such as healthcare, telecommunications, the financial sector, the water sector, electric utilities, so the electric sector, the oil and gas sector, each of those is represented with a coordinating council. I serve as co-chair of the Electric Subsector Coordinating Council, so that represents the electric utility part of the threat matrix. And I serve as a co-chair representing the electric cooperative part of the business. One of my co-chairs is Pedro Pizarro, who's the CEO of Edison International, so Southern California Edison, representing the investor-owned utilities, and then Tom Kent, who's the CEO for Nebraska Public Power District, representing state and municipal utility public power. So all the sectors are represented. And then there's about 30 electric utility CEOs. All of us have security clearances so that we can meet in classified space with the federal government. And the Electric Subsector Coordinating Council then acts as the principal liaison between government and industry, so we can have conversations in classified space about threats to the grid. Now, our mission is to prepare for and respond to threats. So not just cybersecurity, but also physical threats and weather. So you think severe weather, hurricanes or wildfires. We will be engaging advance of those events with a team that talks with our government partners at DOE, NSA, White House, FERC, whoever we need to be engaged with for whatever issue is happening. And then we can have those daily calls throughout that event until it's successfully mitigated. But the same thing with cybersecurity, and the threats have been only escalating in the time that I've been co-chair since about 2012. And it just kind of gets worse every year. Now we're not just dealing with people who are hackers in their basement, but we're dealing with sophisticated nation states that employ, literally in the case of China, hundreds of thousands of workers who come to work every day. Their mission is to do what Chris did. How can we destroy the utilities or have the ability to destroy the utilities and in a way that is effective, even without maybe launching a single bomb? And so you've read a lot about the different kinds of threats. I can say, based on the briefings I've received, we should take them very, very seriously. Foreign-made equipment that's built in areas that are our enemies likely contains threats, some discovered and some undiscovered. So just be very, very conscious of supply chain. There's the whole China-Taiwan thing. I'm sure our co-panelists are going to talk a lot about. Preparing for 2027, where China has actually stated in the event of an invasion of Taiwan, they might want to disable some of the United States critical infrastructure in advance of that. Now that could occur as early as 2027 per the Chinese government's official plans, okay? So it's something to take extremely seriously. We have nation states, people who get up every morning with their job, how can I hack in the electric grid? How can I plant credentials where I can stay dormant and become active? And then how do we work as the electric subsector to take care of that? We have a couple of tools. One is the Information Sharing and Analysis Center. We call it the ISAC. Now, we're not the only one with an ISAC. Financial services has an ISAC. Telecommunications has an ISAC. But the idea is to collect threat information so the government knows certain things and industry knows certain things, but we don't know how to share that with one another. And the ISAC is one of the ways that happens. So within the ISAC, which again is classified space, industry can report to government, and we have a number of automated monitoring systems on internet firewalls across the utilities in this nation, so that it can be scanning for bad things happening. That gets sent to the ISAC, where then they can connect the dots and say, we see a coordinated attack occurring maybe at Tri-State, also occurring on the East Coast, also occurring in Los Angeles. This looks like it's coming from a government, a foreign government or something. And so they can connect the dots and then declassify the information sufficiently to share it with industry. So they don't want to say, well, we got a listening device in the Chinese president's house. I don't know what, I'm just making that up, by the way. But they're not going to share their methods of retrieving this information, but they might say, utilities, be on alert for maybe malware that's in a particular kind of equipment. We're not going to tell you how we know. We just want you to go look. Or maybe you need to check for this. So that's the ISAC. The ISAC is the Information Sharing and Analysis Center. Most utilities are members of that. Many state governments have hooks into that as well. It's a good thing to be engaged with. Another tool is ETAC, Electricity Threat Analysis Center, which is hosted at the National Lab here in Colorado, here in Denver. Which lab? I'm just blanked on the name. Enroll, thank you. Thank you for that. So at the ETAC, again, in classified space, government analysts can look at threat information with trained utility experts from the utilities who also have a security clearance and say, we're seeing this thing happen. Is this a threat or not? Maybe it's not, maybe it's not a big deal. Or maybe it actually is a big deal because the engineer knows if you do that, that could be very, very bad. And then that enables the government to prepare a response appropriate, perhaps share information with the ISAC again for dissemination to the utilities. I'd say maybe there is a third tool that we all need to talk about, which is the grid threat exercises. This November, we'll be doing something we call GridX. It's kind of like a Super Bowl, and I know not as exciting maybe to some, but it's because it's so similar, we name it with Roman numerals. So we're now up to GridX XVII or something, 8, I think it is. Every other year we do a nationwide exercise with, in this case, it will be not just hundreds, possibly over 1,000 utilities engaged simultaneously in a threat exercise where we suppose some bad thing has happened. It could be hurricane, it could be national disaster, but oftentimes there's an element of cyber risk threat in the exercise. And then we do the desktop kind of, here's move 1, this just happened, how would you respond, utilities? Here's move 2, this just happened, how would you respond? And we partner with our state government and local government authorities and safety management agencies, FBI, sheriff's departments, as many as can play, the better, because we learn something every time. And we learn the weaknesses. Like, for example, many years ago, okay, a bad thing just happened. What are you gonna do? Well, I'm gonna call my federal partner. Well, what if the cell phones are down? What if the electricity's been out for 20 hours and the cell towers no longer have their backup power supply? Now, what are you gonna do? So I just say that's an important tool in our toolbox. And those 3 are things that happen at the ESCC. And we can talk further about how the states can engage with those. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the overview. And I think certainly a lot of topics that we'll be diving a little deeper into throughout this session. So I think, it's no secret, and we've heard a lot about how much the grid has been changing in the past, so many years, and it's constantly evolving. So I guess whether those threats are cyber related or more physical threats, how are you sort of identifying them, identifying priority areas for strengthened security efforts, and how has just those threats evolved on the grid?
I'll start if you don't mind. So most construction companies have taken a safety approach, right? Make sure you send your colleagues and your coworkers home safe and healthy the same way they came to work that day. And I really think that we need to institute in adjacent to that a security way of life, right? A security policy globally. I'll give you one example. I was working with a utility some time back, and they hired an organization to come in and do a penetration test, which is, they come in and test their cyber efforts, security, and also their physical security efforts. And to their credit, this particular utility had a phenomenal cyber team, absolutely phenomenal. But as we like to be friendly folks. There was some social engineering that took place in this particular ordeal. So they picked a location where all of the employees like to hold doors open for each other. And they came in wearing a hard hat, safety vest, and a clipboard. And they walked around the whole facility. And one person asked that penetration expert what they were doing on site. And he said, I'm here to improve the company's Wi-Fi. I was hired by so-and-so over at corporate. And they just said, oh, great, our Wi-Fi here is terrible. And so this person walked around, found a couple of hotel stations that were shared by multiple employees, and instituted a USB device on an open port, and then walked to a different portion of the building and instituted another device on an open network port. And for the next however many weeks, it just sat there and listened and sniffed and just pulled information, usernames, passwords, and that's how they got in. That's how they instituted their their attempted attack. So, as great as it is to hold the door open for your colleagues and your coworkers, at least ask, say, hey, do you have any ID? I don't recognize you. Maybe you're new here, or maybe you're visiting for the day. Another great way of approaching that is wearing visible credentials, right? If the whole entire organization does that, that's your very first line of defense in ensuring that a bad actor doesn't make their way into your facility.
Very much the human is the weak point in the security chain.
Yeah. So I want to say I'm in violent agreement with everything my fellow panelists have said on this. I want to foot stomp something Duane said earlier on in his remarks. One of the big things that's changed over the last 15 years or so with regard to security of the grid is you are no longer defending against random attackers, people who want to do this for fun. Southern California Edison, we work with them a lot. They're one of the most capable, most forward-leaning utilities that we deal with, but it is not a fair fight for Southern California Edison to go up against China and the entire resources of the state of China, or Russia. What we focus on, when we're thinking about dealing with these nation-state level threats to the power grid, the idea that you're going to build a really strong perimeter around your system and just keep the adversaries out is not realistic. So as a nation state, they have a number of different attack vectors at their disposal, whether it be network intrusions, insider threats, physical compromise, close access operations, supply chain operations. They will be able to get in. And so what we advocate is taking a layered approach to every step, making it as difficult as possible for the adversary to achieve their objective. You're not going to stop them, but make it as difficult as possible. The framework that we follow, we call immune infrastructure, a 4-layered framework. Really brief explanation of it is layer 1, understand your system, understand where your vulnerabilities are, understand what your system is. One of the things we do is we can put our bad guy hats on and say, well, China wants to achieve this particular objective in this region. Maybe they want to disrupt operations at a key port. Here's the ways they might be able to attack your system in order to do that. If we were going to do that, here's how we would attack it. That helps us identify where the targets are, where the vulnerabilities are. Layer 2, do your best to keep the adversary out. Just because we're not going to succeed doesn't mean you don't try. So that involves, assuring the software that you put on your system, assuring the hardware, the devices you put in your system. Again, if you buy a Chinese device, you're inviting China into your system. If you buy an American device that uses Chinese parts, you're inviting China into your system. We have lots of stories on that. Layer 3, make sure you're looking at your system, monitoring your IT, your OT, so you can detect and respond when there are intrusions in that system. And it's good to look for signatures and known adversary TTPs that'll help you find most of the threats that are out there. But what we really care about are what are those really subtle things that our adversaries put in our system and are just waiting for the right time to use them. And then layer 4, recognize that layers 1, 2, and 3 are going to make the adversary's life more difficult, but the adversary is still going to win. So design your system so that you can operate through compromise. There's many ways to take advantage of that, particularly as the grid becomes more and more distributed. That distributed nature can be a vulnerability, but if you architect the system, you plan properly, the distributed nature actually also helps you build resilience into the system.
If I could jump in on that a little bit. So that distributed nature, it's important for us when we're working with our state partners, state government partners, to help us understand what's most critical to you. So we do have a program with the federal government where we know, for example, a particular defense facility is extremely critical. They don't have to tell us why, but we need to know so we can make sure that that electrical substation is more protected, not just cyber-wise, but also physical-wise from like kinetic attacks. So we can put concrete walls up or, things to discourage a RPG kind of attack. But we need to know where it's critical. Same with state government. If you've got a particular facility that's extremely crucial, have you had a conversation with your electric supplier to say, can you guarantee me that this one won't go down? I mean, because we can't protect everything. There's too many miles of line out there, but we can make sure that the areas that are most critical are protected. I just encourage you to be in dialogue with your local utility partners.
And I'll add to that. test often, test frequently, right? You always want to look for gaps. Security is an evolving world. Technology changes rapidly, right? So bugs come out that were never previously used before. And if you don't have the resources within your organization, look for opportunities outside. There are experts out there.
In terms of threat detection or identification, how quickly are you able to do that? Are there technologies or other things that could be more supportive to help you be more nimble and responsive?
So I'll say, I don't know if I'd say how quickly in terms of, gosh, we can catch it at machine speed. That's obviously the goal, but there's different tiers. Certainly when you're talking about known threats, signatures, the cybersecurity industry is very advanced in being able to detect things like that well. We aren't focusing our energy on that. Like I said briefly before, we're focusing our energy in detecting the things that no one has seen before, the stuff that's going to give you the really bad day when you really don't need it. One of the most important things, well, maybe I should start with a baseline. The most important thing to enable that is actually monitor your systems. I've been on other forums where we've been talking about grid security and with Rob Lee from Dragos, and one of the things he loves to say is actually look at what's happening on your OT systems. That's step number one. But step number two, there are a lot of government programs that utilities can participate in that allow for collective monitoring, collective defense. Working together as a sector is really beneficial. We talked about ETAC, hosted by NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I'll make sure to give them their shout out. But a lot of us participate in that as well. But other programs that are really good for helping with detection. So Department of Homeland Security has a program called Cybersecurity. In the Cybersecurity program right now, there's about 40 partners around the country. What these partners have agreed to do is let Homeland Security install fairly intrusive network monitors on their system, so they get full data on the OT system. What that allows us to do is take that full access to the data, take our access to the intelligence community and the capabilities that we know the adversary has or wants to build or is talking about building, and the computational resources that national laboratories can bring, the artificial intelligence, machine learning, high performance computing resources to develop ways to detect these very, very subtle threats. One of the stories on this that I've told, again, a number of times before, is a success in that program of detecting surveillance cameras that are placed on IT and OT networks. I won't go into the full story now, but there's a particular Chinese company that makes these cameras. They market them to critical infrastructure. They're very capable cameras. They cost about half as much as their competitors, and they provide China a backdoor into your system. So through the Cybersecurity program, we're able to detect and identify that this was happening, identify the cameras, identify their behavior, but more importantly, create a fingerprint for those cameras from the data we got from those utilities that we could then pass to some of those larger information sharing organizations and give people playbooks for here's how you go and look on your own system for this. So that's why participation in those programs, I think, is so important.
And it also sounds kind of silly, but I've seen it so many times. Default usernames and passwords and administrator level passwords, especially when you hire a contractor to come in to commission a system or whatever. Oftentimes they like to have a service account on some of these devices. So hopefully your IT manager or director is asking these questions. And after that product has been handed over to the utility, they remove that and lock that stuff up.
I hate to share this example because it's not exactly relevant, but it kind of is. So my neighbor's dog got out the other day, but she was gone and it's wandering all over and we don't know what to do. And my other neighbor said, well, let's just try the garage door code. And I said, I don't know his garage door code. And he went 1, 2, 3, 4, boom. And it opened. And he said, every house that was built in this neighborhood, they put the same code in. And apparently they haven't changed their code yet. And this is the example you're talking. It doesn't just happen in neighborhoods. It happens in big companies. And I can guarantee you right now, China's in some of your networks right now as a user with credentials, and you don't know they're there. But I promise you, from the intelligence we've seen, they're in some of the systems, some of the state systems and some of the utility systems, even today. Sorry.
Yeah, the password thing, plus the takeaway that you can get in anywhere with a high-vis vest, you know. um, I guess to that point, are there sort of institutional changes or workforce educational training opportunities that we can sort of instill in folks to help mitigate some of these risks?
Yeah, employee training and also contractor training. In my experience, it seems like the highest violators of security policy tends to be contractors and subcontractors. For one reason or another, they should really have the same training opportunities and mandates across the board. So that way they know what the policy and procedure is working in and around a utilities infrastructure. That's the, one of the main goals.
Yeah, the phishing attacks, we call them PHISH, phishing, are extremely profitable for the enemy because they work so well. And you get them on your cell phone now, but our employees, if our employees get an email, it's from me, looks like it's from me. I need you to reset your password, or here's the link, or they see an email that says your paycheck just didn't get deposited. So log in here and you can tell us what bank to send it to and give us your account numbers. And you'd just be amazed how many people will say, sure, I'll give you that information. And then the bad guys have whatever they need. But getting passwords the same way, it's just prevalent. And we do a little phishing test. So you said, what can you do? We send out fake phishing emails, and then when the employees click on them, we go, ha ha ha, you're really lucky, and you're not going to go to jail, and we're not going to discipline you, but you need to know you just clicked on a link that could have been bad and could have given the enemy credentials to our system. Every time we do this, we catch people. We have 40 board members, by the way, because we have, and you can imagine our board members are farmers and ranchers, maybe not as sophisticated in the cyber world. And so we can usually find one or two of them who are willing to give their credentials.
Hey, I resemble that remark.
So just re-emphasizing it, I think as both of you did, basic cyber hygiene is super important. There are a number of guidelines that are published by various organizations. CISA's got critical security controls. I think the SANS Institute also talks about critical security controls that can help bring your system up to a baseline level of readiness. And I think having the workforce aware of this is super valuable. The other thing that I would add is a lot of times I think people can think, well, we're never going to be a target. No one cares about me. We're too small. That's not the case at all. When you think about what the objective is of some of these actors, they want to cause chaos. They want to disrupt power, sure, but there may be a particular facility, a particular target that they want to cause chaos for. And it just so happens that a lot of our critical defense facilities around the country that are crucially important to our national security, they don't sit in downtown Denver. They sit out in rural areas. They are served by smaller utilities that don't have those resources, and so those guys, everyone needs to understand you could be the target.
Yeah, and Duane, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, and Nate, you really emphasized some of the points, knowing and understanding where your systems come from, who's inside them. Can you talk a little bit about some of the supply chain implications that might affect how we source some of these materials or technologies, and how we can ensure that we're in charge of who's inside our systems?
I thought the question was aimed towards you, Duane.
Oh, so the supply, so we've been working a lot with our federal partners on the supply chain question, but sometimes there's just so little they can share with us that they've seen something implanted in a device. If they share it too much, then the foreign adversary knows that they know. And so there's this big tension on what can you share and what can you not share, so you don't compromise the methods by which this information is being collected. Again, the tapping Xi Jinping's phone number or whatever, and where that came from. So there's a tension between us. One meeting we were in with our federal partners, they said, we've seen some things and we think you should be careful with your supply chain. And I said, okay, can you be more specific? And they said, well, how about you just Google it? Like, Google it? This is the federal government's plan? Now, we've progressed since then, okay? But, and now they're sharing certain things, but still it's very difficult to get like a white list or a black list. I'd say this is the general guidance is if it's made in a foreign country or has parts from a foreign country, it's very likely to be bad, especially if it's coming from China. Do not put Chinese routers. Don't use Russian malware detection software. Certain things like that. You can share more on that end. I mean, it's just a scary world.
Yeah, I think it gets even more complicated when we think about the devices that we buy. I mean, they have a label on the outside, but what's inside that case, who knows? So that's the importance of, there's a couple of projects that are going on in the federal government to help people understand what it is they're buying. The term they use is SBOM, and not to get caught by the acronym, please, software bill of materials, or HBOM, the hardware bill of materials, tools for understanding what are the actual ingredients that go into that device you bought. When I was talking about the cameras before, the particular offending camera that we found was made by a company called Dahua. That is a known bad actor, but there were over 100 other companies, some of whom are very well-known, U.S.-based companies that sell that exact same device, where they basically buy the equipment from Dahua and they put their label on the outside. So just looking at the label on the outside doesn't help. And then software gets even more complicated because, again, company A builds a piece of equipment. The software, the firmware for that equipment, they don't write every line of code of that. They use libraries that and components that come from other places. So being able to understand what your ingredients are, it goes a long way to helping you understand just how much risk you're taking on with that.
We talked a little bit about some of the federal programs and critical federal opportunities. I was wondering, at the state level, are there opportunities for coordination among states or partnerships between states and counties or local governments that can be strong and supportive here?
I think the GridX, jump in front of you there. The GridX is a great opportunity that's coming up in November. And I think most of the state governments are engaged in this already. Just make sure that you really are engaged in it. It's an opportunity to test our responses and our communications tools with one another. In one of the previous GridX, we modeled loss of telecom, and I think it's very important to think about what you actually do. We do these tabletop exercises, but if all the lights went out right now and you lost your cell phone, what are you going to do? Reality. And what's your state agency going to do in reality? As an example, we had a program. I used to work in Arkansas as a CEO of an organization there, and we had a similar issue with the utility communicating with the state government. And they said, in the case of a really bad event, you're going to go to this Air Force base, which has a SCIF, a secure compartmentalized information facility, where we can have classified conversations about what's going on. Okay, let's practice that. Instead of just saying that's what we're going to do, let's try to actually do it. So when I showed up at the Air Force base, supposedly all cleared, couldn't get through the gate because I didn't have the right kind of auto registration for my car. Okay, it's little stuff like that. Can you really get through the gate? And if that bad thing really happened, would I have been able to get into the SCIF to have the conversation? Same thing with state police headquarters. I'm told, oh, there's a SCIF at state police headquarters. If everything goes to hell, if everything goes bad, go there. So I go there and I'm like, all the doors are locked. I don't have a card to get through. Am I supposed to just knock on the door and say, hey, state police, would you let me in? There's a grid crisis happening right now. So I think the exercise part of this is so easy to just say, well, here's what we'll do on a desktop exercise, and not actually exercise the exercise. Let's practice. Let's say, could we all gather in the SCIF or in wherever the state emergency response room is? Let's do it and see if it works. Just the simple stuff like that can really trip up an emergency response.
Great point, Duane. What I would like to see is stronger, harsher repercussions for bad actors. I'll give you a really good example. I was working with a client, longtime client, and they had a lone wolf attack, physical attack at one of their substations, where this person showed up and fired a weapon, multiple rounds into this substation. That individual was arrested and was prosecuted. Yay, great, right? You'd all think so? I followed up on that. That individual was sentenced to 5 years probation. So my question is, what happened there? It was raised to the federal level, and at prosecution time, this particular judge made the determination that there was no loss of product and there was no loss of life. Therefore, not a big issue. That's a punch in the gut for security individuals and law enforcement. These utilities spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and in some cases millions of dollars at a single installation to ensure the protection of our infrastructure, to make sure the lights stay on, you're staying warm or cool depending on the climate. And when these bad actors go in there and try and disrupt that and they get a slap on the wrist, it really takes the wind out of the sails of these security professionals. So that's what I would like to see.
I think one thing we've seen from our sort of from a distance perspective about state partnerships is that there's opportunity for improvement in how states work with the utilities on security measures. In California, where Lawrence Livermore is, we've heard sort of opportunities for improvement on both sides. One is the Public Utilities Commission requires the utilities to release publicly lots of information about their systems. That information is super valuable for someone who wants to attack and disrupt their system. I think there's valid reasons for the state to want that information, but they're harming security by making that information available publicly. On the other side, we've seen utilities not want to really talk to the states about the real risks and their risk assessment, the vulnerabilities, because they think, well, it's none of their business. I don't want to tell them about this. And so they kind of hold the state at arm's distance, so the state doesn't understand those risks. I think if there were a little bit more, connection between the regulators and the utilities, and risk was seen as something that there needed to be this partnership to work together, I think we could have improved results.
I do want to give folks in the audience a chance to ask questions if there are any. Raise your hands.
Hi, thanks for this conversation. There's been a lot of conversation amongst you guys about our adversaries. What are some of the adversarial challenges that we face in the context of grid security when it comes to building out our transmission system?
So it takes too long, and we got to build so much of it. Right now, a transmission line can take anywhere from 7 to 15 years to build. And most of that is permitting. There's one in California that was just completed at 18 years, so it's old enough to vote, but it took that long to get it done. I started in 1982 in this business, so a long time ago. The very first job I had was to plan a transmission line in Southwest Missouri. Not exactly a really difficult place to build infrastructure, right? But 14 years later, that line was built. Okay, it's hard to get gratification in your job, first of all, if that's how long it takes to see fruit of your labor. But more importantly, at a time right now when the grid's moving so quickly and changing, so much change in the resources that are inputting into the grid. And so now it's coming from solar and wind more than it's coming from coal. That means different inputs. It means the transmission system has to be modified. But if it takes us 15 years to build a power line, we're certainly not going to be able to support an energy transition or greater resiliency and reliability. So I'd say working on permitting reform. We've been doing a lot of work of this on the federal level on federal lands, but there's also state lands, and it can be a tool from the people who want to stop development to delay a project, and then you end up with not having the resiliency you need.
One of my answers to that question would be build and design security at the very, very forefront of every project. Siting and routing does not consider security. They just don't. I have over 17 examples of talking with clients from security managers and directors, and I've asked them, what would you like to see changed if you could? And they would like to at least have a very small say in where these locations are being put, right? It may not be the determining factor, but it can help de-risk the amount of security protections that you need to implement, which drives down the build cost or unexpected cost overruns. And that equates to savings at the ratepayers, doorstep.
Yeah, and very briefly, I'd just say one element of this gray zone conflict we're in with our adversaries is the idea of disinformation, misinformation, leveraging political or legal processes to achieve goals. And it certainly would not stretch the imagination to think that our adversary might be helping to enhance some of the problems that we faced, increasing those timelines for being able to get this stuff done.
Hi, yes. Obviously, I was on the previous panel on modernization, and I'm curious how that flows with grid security, because a lot of our old and outdated grid infrastructure does need to be digitized and modernized, and we need to have more digital equipment, power electronics on the grid. So you mentioned a couple really interesting organizations of people that are helping test equipment. And is there any way or existing process, or could we make an existing process that new technologies can go through to be certified of, hey, this is not a cyber risk, because all these professionals from the DHS to whoever looked at it and partnered with the vendor. And so then they could go to the utility and say, we know that this cybersecurity is an issue, and we've done X, Y, and Z to try and mitigate that already.
So there is no ROI on security protections. It's risk mitigation. And it's just like buying insurance, whether it be for your car, your life, your family, whatever. You want to have it in place so that way, if something bad does happen, you're more than likely protected. So what I would suggest to you all, these security managers like myself in my past role, is come up with a better way of explaining the story to the people who fund these projects. A great example. So it's easy to quantify an investment on capital projects, but if you don't accommodate for the ongoing maintenance, preventive or corrective maintenance over the life cycle of this equipment, then it's going to degrade, it's going to fall apart, and then it's going to be completely ineffective. So there is a balance that whenever you ask for additional funding for security protections on a capital project, there's going to be an O&M implication for that. So prepare for that.
Yeah. I will say that there are programs that do testing of systems. So one in particular is DOE has a program called Citrix, stands for Cyber Testing for Resilient Industrial Control Systems, I believe, where the government, researchers, and equipment manufacturers do partner to test this equipment. And so companies like SEL, like GE, will go and give their equipment to this team that will tear it down, look for vulnerabilities, report it back to the manufacturer, let them fix those vulnerabilities before it goes out. And so that does exist. The challenge with that is the throughput of the number of devices you can put through that process is minuscule right now. There are a number of efforts underway to automate a lot of these processes so we can start to do that testing at scales that are relevant for industry, because right now we can test a handful of devices, but it's only scratching the surface of what needs to be done.
Any more questions? All right. Well, I'll ask a final question for the panel then. I think, a lot of work to be done with transmission going forward. I think if there's sort of one thing you could signal to energy developers in the room for making strides with grid security, what would that be?
I'd
be
just say
multiple
sharing information. It's been mentioned a number of times here, but really working together, the state partners, federal partners, the private sector, the utilities, talking together about the threat and how we mitigate it is the best thing we can do. And just being as open as we can with one another to share the threats we're seeing, to share the threats you're seeing, again, what's most critical to you, so that we can make sure those are covered, to me is the best thing we can be doing right now. Working on those grid exercises together, practicing what we say we're going to do. You can have an emergency plan on the bookshelf. Doesn't do you any good if you can't actually execute it. So practicing those things would make a real difference.
You took the words out of my mouth, man. No, the only thing I could offer in addition to that is, like I said earlier, test often, test frequently. Make sure that your protections, your mitigations are actually going to be functional years after they're implemented.
I mean, because one day you're going to need it, really. Yep. To say it's never going to happen is not rational.
So I will, add +1 to all of those points. I think they're spot on. The one additional thing I'll add is going back to the previous panel, grid modernization and grid security should go together. Just like we always hear the story about how, we built the internet and then, years later said, gosh, we should put security, think about security too. We shouldn't do the same thing with the grid. As we build out these new grid architectures, we should think, what are the security and resilience implications of that? How can we leverage what we're doing now in terms of modernization to make it more efficient, more sustainable, and also make it more secure?
Well, thank you so much to the three of you for this awesome wrap-up conversation. Please join us in thanking our panelists.
Thank you.
I'll just quickly close this out here. Really just want to say thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much to our speakers, our moderators over the past couple of days. Thank you to Governor Polis and his team for hosting us, as well as Governor Cox for his continued leadership on this initiative. Also really want to shout out the WGA staff. It's always nice when the whole crew gets to be in the room, and really appreciate them being here. We'll have 2 more of these initiative workshops coming up, hopefully later this year into next year. So please do stay tuned and engaged with us for agenda information, registration, dates, locations. That will all be coming up hopefully very soon. Thank you all so much for being here. We'll have recordings of the sessions available on WG's website if you want to go back and re-listen to anything. Hope to see you at the next one.